Okay, here's Hashem will work this time. Okay, so this is a long overdue shiur on Shabbos Kava Nafsha, which is Psachim Kufay Amud Aleph. So we'll see here that the Gemara says Rav Chananya Bar Shalmia B'Tamidei Rav Kufay Amud Aleph on the top. Habi Yasvi B'Sudasa V'Koyalai Rav Hanuna Saba. So they're all sitting, and Rav Hanuna Saba is Misharis them. Amrulay Zil Chazi in the Kiddush Yama Nafsek Minika the Shabsa. That asked him to go outside and check and see if it was Mikdash Yama. We should have to see what that means. If it became Shabbos, then we should be Mafsik and be Kovei our Suda the Shabbos. Amrulay Lo Tzrichisu Shabbos Kava Nafsha. You don't need to do that. You don't have to be Kovei the Suda for Shabbos because Shabbos is Kovei itself. What's the raya? Damar Rav Kishem Shabbos Kavas LaMeiser. Just like Shabbos is Kovei the Gabi Achilas Meiser, which we'll see what that means. Kach Shabbos Kavas LaKiddush. So it's Kovei for Kiddush, and therefore you don't have to be Kovei. It's Kovei itself for Kiddush. So you have to understand what's the Shakal V'Tari over here, what's the Habim, and what's the Maskana, what are they talking about, and what does it mean also in Mikdash Yoma, to find out if the day became Kiddush. So we all saw that the Rashbam, the way the Rashbam learns the Shaila is that they were sitting in a Suda Shabbos. Rashbam says, Erev Shabbos, and they were Marich in this Suda in Erev Shabbos until it became dark. So Ad Shechashecha, the Rashbam uses the word Lashon Ad Shechashecha. The Stam Lashon Chashecha means Tzetzuk Chavim. Doesn't mean that Shabbos just came in, that it became Benish Mashas, but Chashecha means Tzetzuk Chavim. The Rashbam is going to say at the end also, we'll see in a minute, he also uses Lashon Chashecha, which there's a Rashbam and Kufi Dala Amud Aleph. It says Beferish that when it's Kiddush Hayom, or the Lashon over here, Kiddush Hayom usually would mean just the way you usually use it as is Benish Mashas. But the Rashbam himself says in Kufi Dala Amud Aleph, Lashon Tivur Maskil the Kfar Kiddush Hayom, he says, so he says, Tzias Kachavim, Tzias Kachavim, that's Kiddush Hayom. So the Shitas of the Rashbam says by us that Kiddush Hayom means Chashecha, means actually became dark. So the Rashbam says that, it goes on to say that, but Nafsik, if it's Kiddush Hayom, if it became Chashecha, became Kiddush, we'll see in a minute the Rif, in a few minutes the Rif's cholik on this, but this is the Rashbam Shita. So that if a nafsik would be Bekira Shulchan, that's to be Okras or Shulchan, because they held that to be Kaveya, the Suda Chavet Shabbos. And if you remember, we learned in the previous sugyas that Akira Shulchan, nobody speaks that out here beferish, but I would assume that Akira Shulchan, like we learned it in the previous sugyas, always means benching as well. You don't just take away the table, but Akira Shulchan means it's a complete Akira from the previous Suda and a Naya Suda completely. So that would seem to also be Kolel. Have to bench. The Rashbam goes on to say, "V'nikvei l'suda seinu b'Shabbos l'shem Shabbos." So the answer is back. L'tzrichisu l'hafsik b'kir shulchan. You don't have to be ad kadei kach b'mafsik kir shulchan kadei l'havdol ben sudas chol suda Shabbos. To be mavdol between the two, to be kovea now the suda you're eating for the shem suda Shabbos. You don't need mamash kir shulchan for that. And what's the raya? The Shabbos he kava nafsha l'sudasai. Says Rashbam, "Me'achashi aseres aleinu lecha mi'ata below kiddush, and lecha hefzer gadol mizeh u'mi'atzma suda Shabbos chashiva nivdelis suda schol v'dailachem v'prisus mapa v'kiddush." Says Rashbam that the Isra Achila itself, that is usher to eat now before kiddush, that itself is mavda between the suda schol and the suda Shabbos. That makes avdol between them, and it becomes now on its own. The Isra creates the Isra Achila, that when you begin to eat again after the Kiddush, then that itself makes it into a new Suda. And we'll see in a minute what the Raya is from Meiser. We'll talk about that in a minute. But it's interesting that the Rashbam over here interjects that there's going to be an Isra Achila before the Kiddush in order to have to do previous Presis Mabba and Kaddish. Now, this seems to be, I would call it a stira, but I certainly have to point it out that back in the sugya of Priestess Mappa of Shmuel, or the Poros Mappa of Kaddish, there the Rashbam learned there and other places, we learned this before, that in Sugi Poros Mapam Kaddish, that in Sugi Yossi of Rabbi Yehuda, and Shmuel came along, and Yossi held that you're allowed to be ochel, you can continue eating it at Tekshach and make Kiddush after the Suda, and Rabbi Yehuda held you have to be mafsik with Akira Shulchan Mamish. And then we had the sheet of Shmuel that all you have to do is being Poros Mapam Kaddish. And the other Rashbam said, there in the Kuf Gilum base as well, that that really Shmuel, the dinner priest's mappa is a chumra aliba de Rabbi Yossi. It really holds like Rabbi Yossi. There is no iser achila when Shabbos comes in while you're in the middle of your suda. There's no really an ikar din. You can make kiddush after the suda, and that's also Tosfos pointed out. That's also considered kiddush makom suda, even though you didn't make it before. Kiddush makom suda is in the makom, and the right away sabach to the suda when you finish it, you're koveh, you're makadosh. That's called kiddush makom suda. So, but there's no Isser B'davar. It's just a Maila, and it's a Tosefis, the Rashbam said, B'Shem the Shiltas, of Kavod Shabbos, that the Shetetze Sudasa L'Yakar de Shabbos, should be a din in Kavod Shabbos, that you Machasa, you cover the Suda, and then you make Kiddush, and you bring it back out again to uncover it, the Kavod Shabbos. That's a din in Kavod Shabbos. So, I would have thought that the Rashbam over here would have said the same, and then that would have been a problem also, that how exactly does that take care of the problem over here? But Rashbam clearly says that there's an Isra Achila over here. It's an Isra Achila, and that's what's mavdil between the Sudas Chol and Chodesh Shabbos, that they thought they have to be, the Shaklatari, the back and forth over here between the Talmidei Rav and Rav Hanuna was on this Nakuda, whether or not you need to have an actual Akira of your Suda. And Kamash Malan, you don't need an Akira. It's enough to have Priestess Mappa Mukadesh. So that's really the Shaklatari. Everyone is talking about this man. This man we know is talking about Seisuk HaChavim. That's where the whole Shiloh begins. Before Seisuk HaChavim, nothing to talk about. It's totally fine. But now that we got to this time of Seisuk HaChavim, the Shiloh is to what extent you have to, what do you need to do in order to be Kovea this Suda L'Chavot Shabbos? And here the Rashbam speaks out that the Rav Hamnuna is telling them, and we'll see in a minute the Raya from Meiser, that Shabbos is Kovas, Mela, that creates an Isser Achila Kodem Kiddush, until you're Makadosh. And for that Isser, it's enough to be Paras Mappa Makadosh, because the Isser itself creates a separation between the two Sudas. So here the Rashbam is deviating from what he said back in this previous sugya of Priestess Mappa Makadosh. If you remember Tosfos over there and the other Rishonim all asked on the Rashbam that Shmuel is a Liban Aman. It doesn't work out according to anybody. And Tosfos over there learned that it's Taka and Isser. It's an Isser to eat without Kiddush. So who is that Shita? It's not like a Yehuda, not like, according to Yehuda, you need a Kira Shulchan. According to Yossi, no Isser at all. You can keep on eating until after. So Tosfos Machadish that it's Acherim. There's a third Shita of Acherim. There's another Shita Tanoim that holds like this, that the Taka is an Isser Achila, and you do Priestess Mappa Makadosh. The Rashbam over there wasn't Makabel that. He just said it's a Chomer Liber of Yossi. So it's interesting that here the Rashbam learns like Tosfos over there. Here the Rashbam is learned in Tosfos by us also in Kufay. They both learned that there's an Isser over here. So it's interesting the Rashbam didn't want to say that over there. Here it's Shitas Rav, and there the Rashbam had a problem that Liber Daman, who was according to, and he had to say it's a Chomer and Rav Yossi. Why didn't the Rashbam over there just say that, like Tosfos, that it's according to Rav over here? Well, we have to say that this is a really separate discussion, but we'll just throw this out for a second. That there's a Rosh Chanan in Ksuvas Tavches over there, where the Gemara over there says the Rav Tana Apalig. There's a Yisod Rav Tana Apalig. Rav himself for himself is Tana Apalig. He doesn't necessarily have to conform with any other Shittas Tanoim. He's allowed to be Cholik himself. He's a Tana Apalig, and so. The Rashbam must be learning that Rav over here that says Poros Mappa Makadosh, he's talking not a Liber Rabbi Yossi and not a Liber Rabbi Yehuda. He's his own Shita, Rav Tana Apalig, so he's allowed to be cholik and Chadash and Yisod. Just that Shmuel, we see rayos from the Gemara that Rabbi Yochanan and Shmuel did not hold Rav Tana Apalig. So machlokas whether you hold that or not. So for Rav himself, and he was the beginning of the very beginning of the Dora HaMaroyim. He was a Talmud of Bechia. He was right at that time of the crossover between Tanaim and Amoraim. So that's the Shiloh of Rav Tana Apalig. Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish were barley plucked on Rav throughout Shas. So they obviously held that Rav is not Tana Poli. So that's why the Rashban back in the previous sugya in Shmuel couldn't say that Shmuel is holding like Rav, because that wouldn't, according to Shmuel, that's not a Tana. It has to fit into Rabbi Yossi, to that previous price, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. But Rav himself, he's allowed to be cholik, and so he's coming along and saying that the Talmidei de Rav, Rabbi Hununa, Talmud de Rav, can say a new shita that it's really an Isser Achila from the time of Kiddush, from the time the Chi of Kiddush. So
Rabbi, didn't we say back in that sugya that there was like the third shita was like from Yerushalmi?
Yeah,
wasn't there like a Yerushalmi that was the Achirim? So like what? So it's like here we're saying, if I understand Rebbe, we're saying that the Rashbam is saying that he's saying that over there he didn't say it because he doesn't hold like Rav, but here is a story of the Talmidim of Rav, so the Talmidim could hold that Rav is Tana Upali. Is that like why not? He could have just said the whole time that it was Achirim. So
yeah, so for some reason
it doesn't really clear why he didn't over there go by the Achirim.
Yeah, we don't really know why the Rashbam over there wasn't Makabal that shita the Yerushalmi. I don't know. It's for whatever reason it wasn't Makabal over there, so he held that we don't have that shita the Yerushalmi. So I'm not sure.
That's why he's switching.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, just a fascinating nakuda that here we have here on Megala, here the Rashbam is masking that there is a shita that there's taka and Isser, and we have this problem. Okay, so but just to clarify though that we know that over here that we're talking that the shakla Tari of the Gemara is on this nakuda, whether or not yet what extent it's been mafsik or suda. It's not about the zman. There's no question of zmanim over here. It's just it's it. Oh, so I'm trying to get in. Yes. I have to keep on noticing if there's something going on in the corner of my computer. Okay. So the shakla Tari of the Gemara, according to Rashbam, is that shala? Is this nakuda of to what extent you have to be mafsik or suda in order to be kaver suda b'chabed suda Shabbos? Now the Gemara's raya needs some discussion. The Gemara's raya is the keshem shekavas lamaiser ka kavas in Kiddush. Just like there's so the Rashbam explains that Shabbos kava nafsha, the raya to this yisod of kava nafsha is from maiser. Says the Rashbam, keshem shekavas lamaiser pirish achilas aroi.
Don't take it off.
Noise over here. Oh, okay, good, thank you. All right, so that says Rashbam, Kshem Shkavas Lamaiser, Perish, Achilas Aroi, the Shabbos, Chashvi Osa Keva Lamaiser. The Achilas Aroi of Shabbos, because of the din of Onig Shabbos, there's a chashivus to every Achila in Shabbos that no matter what you eat, it becomes davar chashuv. It's like a davar kavua, like Achilas Keva. The Sechas Beit. Because the Oneg Shabbos is machshiv the Achila, even though generally it would be considered Achilas Aroya, be patur from Meiser. Here it's Chayv and Meiser. Afilu Sudas Kol Shehu Didah Kevahu. Even a Kol Behu, Mashu Ba'alma, let's say that would be mutter for Mitzad, let's say Achila Kodem Tfila, whatever, like Kodem Mincha, that you can have an Achilas Aroya. Or Achilas Aroy Chutz L'Sukkah, different times you're allowed to have Achilas Aroy. When Shabbos comes in, the din of Einig Shabbos is machshiv every Achila to make it into Achilas Keva. There's such thing as an Achilas Aroy. And Ochlim b'Shabbos Achila Aroy mitfua shelo nigmar malachta l'maiser imken iser me'erev Shabbos. As soon as Shabbos comes in, which according to Rashbam, if he's going to Shitaso, as we'll see, Hemshech Advarim, that this is talking about once it becomes Tesel Kochavim, so then the Din Onig Shabbos is in its full Tokef, and that's Machayev you to be Meiser, something that you're not allowed to eat it until you're Meiser it. Let's just say we're going, which might mean that you can't eat it at all if you weren't Meiser it before. Just that there's an interesting Shita of the Mishnah Melech, which is cited here by the Rabbi Ransberg. He doesn't say what he says, but there's a very long Mishnah Melech in Hilchos Meiser that's Machadash Kavalig, so that whatever is Chayav and Meiser Mitzad Shabbos, It's Isra is only mitzad Shabbos, it wouldn't have been considered achilas keva on its own right. So it's not mitzad the chefza of the tvua that it's chayav, but it's chayav mitzad the gavra that he's chayav in onig Shabbos. So that tvua holds the Chadash, the Mishnah Melech. You could be meiser that even on Shabbos, because the whole purpose of that it becomes chayav is because of the cheshivas of Shabbos. The onig Shabbos is mechayav it. It can't be that onig Shabbos is mechayav you not to eat it. So it's not a chalos and etzim tefua. It's a din your gaber and the gaber mitzad. Your meiser achila now becomes an achila cheshuva. So then memela you could be meiser this on Shabbos, even though generally it can't be meiser on Shabbos. It's very geschmack. That's the Mishnah Melech there. So just like it's kovea that it becomes an achilas keva for meiser, so it's considered a different achila than it was before. It's the onig Shabbos we see gives a different toikif to the achila you were eating before. Now it's a different level of achila. So in the same way, it's also kovea to make your suda into a suda Shabbos, even though you weren't oker that suda and bring it to it. You weren't sign that suda. You weren't oker it. Still, it becomes a suda Shabbos on its own. So as Rashban continues, kavas lakidish also litoim achi kadesh. Here, the Rashban is masking, like we said before, it's a new shita that it's usher to be toim until you're makadesh. The same way you can't eat the meiser until you're meiser, you also can't be toim this food until you're makadesh, because that's machshiv it, and it gives it a din of oinik Shabbos, of Suda Shabbos. So Suda Shabbos you can't eat without kiddush. Alma mishachashecha, again he mentions chashecha, nightfall. He chashuva achilas Shabbos mi'aleha. That's the shita of the Rashban. Now the Rashban interjects over here. He says, "Afilu tfua shaloi nigmar malachta." It's not really our sugya. I mean, just that he mentions that over here. So the Rikveger and the Gosman Tzal Ransberg both point out that this is a shaila in the sugya in Beitza that the Rashbam is going on, and there's a machlokas in the beginning of the sugya whether or not it's kovea even by there's two separate dinim over here we're talking about. There's one din of lo nigmar malachta, that's very far from a chiyuv meiser. They didn't have a gemara, even gemara malacha yet. Now there's a second din, it could be nigmar malachta, but it's still it wasn't nichnas yet. You didn't bring it into the bais. You didn't bring it into a makom that's mechayev it. So then it's totally in the achila, whether we're eating achilas or right, achilas keva. So the Rashbam extends this even to a step further. The question is even why does he need to even do that? But besides that, why does he need to do it? That he comes in conflict with the maskanas Gemara in Beitza. That's where Rikveger just says, "I am Beitza lamadal amabez dafla hamahem aleph." Rikveger is very meduic over here. He says lamadal amabez and lamadhem aleph. Because lamadal amabez it's a machlokas. If we say that Shabbos is kovea even for davar shalom nigmar malachta, but the maskanas Gemara according to Rabbi Yochanan, lamadhem aleph is clear that it is only by davar nigmar malachta, and that's the psak of the Rambam in Chos Meiser. That only tvua that was nigmar malachta, now Shabbos kaveh that you can't eat that tvua achilas aroi because it becomes achilas keva. But at least it has to be nigmar malachta, or there's nothing to talk about. And it's still mufka legamri from the chiyuv meiser. So that's a problem in the Rashban. So the Mishnah Melech, he mentions over here, look at the Mishnah Melech, that it really deals with this problem. He deals with it from a different vantage point. He asks us a steer in the Rambam, which without going into all the details, it seems to be a steer of the Rambam. And this point, exactly, precisely, whether Nigmar Balachta or not, would be Chayav in Meiser. So when Shabbos comes in. So Mishnah Melech speaks out of Yesod. He has two possible terusim to this Rambam. One is to say that, and that's what he's referring to over here to answer the Rashbam, is that when do we paskin that it needs to be nigmar malachta to be chayav and meiser when Shabbos comes in? That's if it's just tfua stam. You weren't miyached it for Shabbos. Now Shabbos comes in, so then it needs to be, we paskin has to be nigmar malachta to be chayav and meiser. However, he brings rayas that if you're miyached this tfua for achilas Shabbos, when you were when you put aside this chita, this grain or whatever, this food for Shabbos, you said it's going to be especially for Shabbos. So then it's Chayav and Meiser on Shabbos that it's miyuchad for. That's the Yisod of the Mishnah Melech, which he wants to say that that'll be shot in the Rashbam. That's what he means. He's Maramis to over here in the Hagos in the bottom of the Sal Ramsburg, that the Rashbam will be talking about Oichel, that you're miyachad the Shabbos, and that's why he says even if it's lodim we're malachtai. There's other tirutzim also. I can't really go into this so much, but it'll be just a question then that why would the Rashbam put himself into that machlokus and be machadish that we're talking about here, that was food that was dafka yuchad for Shabbos? What was bothering him to come onto that, to have to say we're talking about such a case, and therefore to say even lo nigmar malachta is still chayav? Okay, these are really hilchos meiser shalos without going too far into it. But yes, go ahead.
Is this idea that it's kovea like universally accepted? Because I think we saw earlier, like when we said about doing kiddush for others, it's like a machlokes. I think like the Shiltei Geburim said that you could just do kiddush over peiros because Shabbos is kovea all of the sudas. But we argued with him and we said that no, we went like the Geonim, that you have to actually have like mizonos or yayin or kzayas of hamotzi or something like that. Like, is there a machlokas on what that would apply here as well, and what would be kovea the suda? Like, because we're saying by meiser that it's like if you're miyached or something like that, does it make any difference what the object is that I'm being miyached for Shabbos? Like, does it have to be specifically wheat, or like maybe that's what the Rashbam is going on?
I mean, it doesn't say that. And the sugya there does not specify wheat. It's talking about all peiros, all peiros that have been meiser. So lav dafka. And actually, if you remember, we spoke out that according to the Igros Moshe and others with Tzala Chachma, then you really actually could make kiddush on peiros. That's why Moshe answered up the Gemara that the Zimnin Sagian Shmuel made kiddush up in the attic, and then he went down, and then he made kiddush again because he must have made it just he wanted to eat peiros up there, and that was mutter to do, and he was matir to the achilas peiros over there, because that's what he wanted to eat, even though you weren't yotze yet kiddush makom suda, that you're mechuyev to make another kiddush mitzad the makom suda shabo, but it was matir to eat those peiros as long as you had an achilah b'alma. So that was the machlokes, that's what Moshe held. So here the Gemara does, and basically never specified that, doesn't have those kind of peiros. It's just these are all. I'm only talking about it because it's right here in the Rashbam, and the Achronim here on the spot speak about it. So I'm not going to get too far into this. If you want to really get into it, take Ayin Shama, Mishnah Melech, and Hilchos Meiser, and make sure you have a couple hours available for. It's interesting. It's like a standing joke in the Kolo. Once I was speaking out in the Kolo that somebody went to speak to Rabbi Yashiv in the middle of his man, was during his man learning to speak over with Rabbi Yashiv, a Mishnah Melech. So Rabbi Yashiv said to him, Mishnah Melech not for the middle of this man. Mishnah Melech for Ben Zmanim. That's for like Ben Zmanim learning. The Zman, that's a Rashba. It's a Tosfos and a Rashba. So I said it over in the Kolo. One of the guys said, yeah, like I feel the same way. Like by me, Ben Zmanim is touched by a story. Well, Yashiv, Ben Zmanim, like Mishnah Melech, that's Ben Zmanim material. You know, that's you have some extra time, to sit back and learn Mishnah Melech. Okay. So getting back to the story. So we have the picture over here. The raya over here. Okay, I guess we can sort of understand it. The fact that there's a kviyus al yedei oneg Shabbos that's machayav a whole different level of achila, brings it to a different level of achila, and therefore it's enough to have priestess mappa, because we don't have to actually mechalik it. The Talmidei Rav thought we have to actually do a ma'aseh to make its end the first meal and start a new meal Chavod Shabbos. And Meiser shows us we don't need to do that. That there's a new kfiyas of achila mitzad oneg Shabbos, and that gives it a din of a Suda Shabbos. Just now we have to mark it the has to be marked by this the priest's mappa. The Rif. So there's one other nakuda I want to say. Okay, we'll see. We'll speak out afterwards a little bit more to understand even better the Rashbam. Maybe once we're at it, we'll just talk about it now. I don't have the Rambam here with me right now, unfortunately. But if you take a look, just to understand this even a little better. Actually, I might have the Rambam quoted. Because really the question is, once we say all this on the Rashbam, before we go on to the Rif, so what's the need for the priest's mappa? If the Isser and the Isser alone already creates a situation that there's a din onig Shabbos and that's what's mabdul the Suda, so then, so the Maisa, what do we need the priest's mappa for? What does the priest's mappa exactly accomplish? The lesson of the Rambam in Perek Lamed Hilchos Shabbos Halacha Hey, he says, "Mesader Adam Shulchano be'erev Shabbos." You set up your shulchan be'erev Shabbos. Aval pi she'enu tzarich ela lekazayis kedei lechabdo v'knisaso v'yetziaso. You have to mechabed Shabbos. These are the dinim of kavod Shabbos. Mechabed it v'knisaso v'yetziaso. So he says that the siddur shulchan is nichlal in the din kavod Shabbos. And it goes on to say that. So if you have the. He goes on to explain the dinim of Oneg Shabbos after that, the Rambam. He says the Etzem Achilas Asuda is a din, the Achilas Asuda, the Siddur Shulchan for the Suda is din Kavod Shabbos. The Achilas Asuda is din an Oneg Shabbos. He says Ezu Oneg, he goes then and it brings what kind of food you should eat and everything, and then Halacha Tes, he says the din of Shalosh Sudas and Shabbos. So you see clearly that the Etzem Achilas Asuda is the Oneg Shabbos. But he has another chiddush over there, the Rambam says, is that in order to be kind of Oneg Shabbos, it has to be nicker that what you're eating is Suda Shabbos. There's a din hecker, it has to be nicker, that's what you're doing. Because it says in Halacha Ches, Mishahaya Anug v'Ashir v'Hari Kol Yamav K'Shabbos, if a person is wealthy and you're always eating big meals, you're always having state dinners at your house and people over and everything, so there's no way to be really mavdil, and you can't make it much more chashuv than it already is for Suda Shabbos. Tzarech l'shanos meichel Shabbos meichel kol. You have to change the food in some way. He says in Iyashar l'shanos yishanos manachila l'hakdim or l'acher. There's to be a shinui in the zman, if not a shinui in the etzem meichel. There's nothing else to change. So you see from the Rambam that in order to be mekan oneg Shabbos, there has to be a hecker in that what you're doing is oneg Shabbos. Only then you're mekayim oneg Shabbos. If it looks mamish like Sudas Kol, then the Rambam says that the lack of a hecker detracts from the kiyum of oneg Shabbos. So this might be the nakuda of the Rashbam over here, that even though there is an isser beside the etzem achila and then oneg is kovea that is Sudas Shabbos, but sof kol sof, you need to have a hecker that is chavod Shabbos. And the Rashbam already explained before, he did already tell us that from the Shiltas that in that previous sugya, that priestess mappa, you're covering it and making kiddush, now you take it out, it's yatsa liyakra de shabsa, it comes out l'chavod Shabbos. So that you can say that creates a hecker now. That's what it does, that's what the priestess mappa, we thought that you have to make a shinu in the etzem suda, and only then you're mekayim oneg Shabbos. You have to stop the suda and start it again. Kamash v'lam, Shabbos kava nafsha, it's kaveh the din oneg, the mitzad atzmo, be'etzem bechefza, it is a suda Shabbos now. Just all you need now is to hecker to make sure that you mekayim oneg Shabbos, mekayim that Rambam, so that we say you need priestess mappa for the hecker Shabbat. That could be a good shot in the Rashbam possibly. Now the Rif learns a completely different shakulutari over here. The Rif learns very, very fascinating. He says, Chofal Beis in the Rif. Go see if it became dark outside, so we should be kaviar suda l'chavet Shabbos. The mikvah. You don't need to do that. He kavah nafsha. It's kaveh itself. Dalki amarav kishem Shabbos kavas l'meiser kakavas l'kiddush perish. Kol davar she'oichel mimenu b'chol aroi v'adayin lo hutzi mimenu meiser also lecho mimenu b'Shabbos. El imken iser. Whatever is usher, whatever is not kavua, you could eat meiser on the Erev Shabbos, is usher now in Shabbos. My time came to chsi b'karasa l'Shabbos oinig boila nugi l'Shabbos b'meichel l'mishte. State in pasuk in Yeshaya, you have to be the cross l'Shabbos oinig. You have to have oinig Shabbos b'meichel mishte. Yishtalak lahu kol peri mitoras aroi v'havalu toras commanded mazminu l'meichel min ayu b'Shabbos. All it's paka the dinner right from all the Paris, and as if you're mazmin them all, eat them on Shabbos. The Torah's keva. If you're a meiser mi'ba'od yom, you can eat from it. I feel the safak hashecha, safak inak hashecha, a meiser nesavadai. That there's an isser to eat anything. The Mishnah says even safak hashecha is also to be meiser if it's vadai. Miosa, since it's also to be meiser from that point on, from benish mashas, from safak hashecha. That point on, we also is kavasa no Shabbos l'meiser. Basar lechol mehem ba'otzah Shabbos. Mikvu l'meiser. Can be safak hashecha l'safak inak hashecha kavod Shabbos atzma l'kiddush. L'sachisu l'medak ichashecha ilo hashecha l'mikva mishun b'kava nafsha. Ho v'safak hashecha safak inak hashecha prisu mapa b'kiddush. V'tihar l'sudas aichu. So he told them. So since there's an isra of achila until you're meiser, and it can't be meiser from safek hashecha from benish mashos. So that's the moment of the isra achila l'gabe meiser. It's also those moments of isra achila until you're mekadesh, and therefore you don't have to be medayak. You don't have to send me out to be medayak to see if it already became chashecha vadai. If it already became tzesuk kachavim, you can be paris mapa mekadesh now from benish mashos. It's already from this point on. So the Rif has a very different shaklotarya than the Rashbam. The Rashbam hold the shaklotarya was you have to be Oka the Suda, or it's enough to be Porsche Maham Kaddish. The Rif holds that for sure there was no question about Porsche Maham Kaddish that we know. We don't paskin like Rabbi Yehuda. The shaklotarya was at what point is there in Israel Chilo and do you have to be and is there a din to be Porsche Maham Kaddish? Is it Vadei Chashecha like the Rashbam said that's the Maskana, that's what it is. So, and that's what they thought, like the Rashbam. It comes and tells Rav Menuna, no, you don't need to wait till then. That there's already a Zman Yisrael Chila from Benish Mashas on Meiser, because the Din Onig Shabbos begins already at that point. The minute Savach HaShecha, the Rashbam seems to learn that the Din Onig Shabbos only kicks in by Tzesuk Kachavim. But the Rif is learning that Rav Menuna is telling them that there's already a Din Onig Shabbos from the moment of the Isra of Meiser. It's a real question of why are the two Tali Haba? Like the Achronim really point this out that I understand why there's an Isser of to be Meiser, because I can't do a Tikkun Mana to the Paris from the time of Benish Moshe. It's already Suffolk Shabbos, so how could I do a Tikkun Mana? I can't be Meiser anymore. But how do we know from there that the din of Onig Shabbos already kicks in? The Rif, it's pushed to the Rif that the two are Tali Haba. Not so clear why, but it's a very different shaklotarya according to the Rif. So now, we'll see more about this in the next part of the sugya. The Mishnah Brura, just on this last Nakuda, the Balamor learns the exact opposite. Balamor learns Mamish Pum Fakir that they thought that they wanted to see when they said go and see if Kaddish Yama meant go see if it's Benish Mashas. Yeah, and then therefore we have to stop eating and make Kiddush. And he said, from Benish Mashas is not a problem. It's not going to be a problem until Vadei Chashecha. And we're far from that. So don't worry, you can keep eating now. It's not a problem yet. It's only going to be a problem when it becomes says the Kochavim. So the question of Sakotari is also about this man, but exact opposite of this man. But the Melchamas, the Ramban and the Melchamas here, he strongly is cholak on the Balamor, the Mekayim, the Rif, and that's also the Psak of the Mishnah Berurah. He says in Reish Ayin Aleph, Sifkat Yud Aleph. The Shulchan Aruch says in Reish Ayin Aleph Sif Daled, Asur Litoim Klum Kodem Sheyakadesh Afilu Mayim Afilu Hisko Mibod Yom Tzarich Lahafsik Sheporis Mapa Mekadesh. So the Mishnah Berurah says Asur Litom V'Zeu Rak Isur Drabanan Atam Kevin Echiyav Shel Kiddush Chal Olav Miyad B'Knisa Shabbos, like the Rif, that the Chiyuv Kiddush is Chal immediately by Knisa Shabbos. I feel the Lokiba Olav Shabbos Behedya, even if you weren't yet Makabel Shabbos. It came in Shanasa Safek Hashecha Mamela Chal Olav Shabbos. As soon as it's Safek, now there's a Chal Olav Shabbos. In Kibbel Olav Shabbos, if you're Makabel on yourself Shabbos, even earlier than is an Isser to before Kiddush. But the interesting, the Mishnah Berurah paskins this way. The Aruch HaShulchan paskins seems to paskin like the Balamor. He says it's only a problem from Chashecha. He says Lashon Chashecha, which Stam means at nightfall, like the Rashbam. But the Mishnah Berurah, and that's how we ought to be noeg, says that it's already a problem from Ben Hashmashas. Okay. One last ha'ora on this important ha'ora on the sugya is that according to the Rif that the Kamash Malon, that's the Psak of the Mishnah Berurah, is we don't need Chashecha, but it's enough as Ben Hashmashas. It comes out that the Achronim Rabbi to see according to the Rif that you need Pashtus, you need Ben Hashmashas to be Mekadesh, and you can't be Mekadesh before that. We see that the Din Kiddush is only Chal Ben Hashmashas. That's a stira to the Gemara in Brachos that says that Rav Tzali Me'erev Shabbos and Mekadesh. Rav used to be Mekadesh. He would die, like we do many times, like when Mekabel early Shabbos. It's in Furish halacha and Shulchan Aruch Reish Samach Zayin Sif Beis that a person could daven early on Erev Shabbos and be Mekadesh while it's still daylight, as long as it's after Plaga Mincha. So why would the Rif over here say that you can only be Mekadesh from the point of Ben Hashmashas? So what I thought is that al derech what we said from the Rambam here in Achanabi, the Rif of course agrees to that Gemara that you could daven and start the Suda off Erev Shabbos from Plaga Mincha with Kiddush. Everyone agrees to that. Here the problem is that you're in the middle of a Suda already. When you're in the middle of a Suda already, and now you have to be machalik, you have to be mavdil between the Tchilas Suda, which is Suda's Chol, and now the Sofa Suda, which is the Suda Shabbos. That the Rif holds that you can't just do that. You can't just decide in the middle of a Suda, in the middle of Yom Chol, once you already started the Suda's Chol, to make Kiddush and Mamshachat, then it's missing some ingredient over here of the Heker or the Kvius, the Chavod Shabbos, once you already Kaveh a Suda's Chol out of it. So you don't have the power on your own to turn it into a Suda Shabbos unless you have at least the tziruf that it's Ben Hashmashas. So, and Atako found in the Tzlach, it says like this, and he says a Kiddush according to this, that if you do want to turn it and make Kiddush earlier, he says according to the Rif of Geshmaka Kiddush, that if you want to be Koveh Suda Shabbos, once you already started B'Yom Chol, the only way to do that would be Taka to be Oker Shulchan. That's to actually do a real Kira Shulchan, not just Poras Mapa and Makadosh. Because you have to mamish be Oker the Suda Kodemis, because you don't have the koach of the Oineg Shabbos to be turned it into a Suda Shabbos, then you have to do it yourself. The only way you can do it yourself would be to the Oker Shulchan, which passes means you have to bench and restart the Suda again, the Chavod Shabbos. Otherwise, you don't have the koach to do that. So that's why the Rif over here specifies Ben Hashmashas. Yeah.
If we're saying that in order for it to be a Seuda, there has to be Oneg Shabbos, like that Oneg Shabbos is what turns it into Suda Shabbos. So then how could you ever do Kiddush on Friday, like early? because let me say the Kiddush has to be b'makom suda. So if it's not really like Oneg Shabbos yet and Polbein Shmashos, then according to that Shita, it's not a Suda yet. So you're not doing Kiddush b'makom suda. So even if you wanted to say like you were going to eat like much later or something, you'd still have to do Kiddush b'makom suda, no?
So, okay, very good point. And there, if you remember, we once spoke this out, that this taka machlokas, whether you really are Yotze or you have to, or the Suda, there's a Magen Avram that it really needs to extend into Shabbos to really be Yotze. But the way we're knowing is that, and this will be along the same lines, that if we're Kaveya Suda's Chol, so then you can't just decide in the middle of the Suda that, I want to be in kind of Oneg Shabbos with this. You have to, but if you are Kaveya that is Shabbos for you, you're Makabel Shabbos early, so then there's an asay then of Tishbos. We say the asay of Shabbos stretches before the din Kabbalah Shabbos. There's an asay. It doesn't become Shabbos when you're Makabel Shabbos, or it doesn't become Shabbos like a Chiyav Skila and everything like that. You don't have the clock to do that. But the way we paskin is that you can be that the din of the asay of Tishbos, once your Makabel Shabbos is already calling you at that earlier time. So then from that point on, if you were Okra Shulchan and then you're Makadesh, so then it becomes Shabbos for you, the Gabe, that also you have it in Oneg. What we're talking about is if you're in the middle of Suda Shabbos, you need the real Oneg of Shabbos itself in order to be Mahapachet from Suda's Chol to Suda Shabbos. But if you started off, or in the case that the Tzlach says, according to the Rif, that if I'm Okra Shulchan and I bench, I restart the Suda with Kiddush, so then I could become Oneg Shabbos also, because it becomes Shabbos for me by Kabbalah Shabbos, Klape this that have an asay of Tishbos, and I'm also Makam Oneg Shabbos at that point on. Now I'll become one of the three Sudas of Shabbos as well. I need 3 times Hayom. It's enough Hayom to be considered a Suda Shabbos for the Kiyum of the Gimel Sudas for Shabbos. That's
so as long as I'm Mekabel Shabbos, by the time I'm doing Kiddush, I've already been Mekabel Shabbos, and I'm starting the meal Lechavot Shabbos, so that's already going to get me also the mitzvah of Oneg Shabbos.
Right.
Good. Okay.
As it comes out. Okay. So we'll try to as fast as we can to get through the next part of the sugya, because I thought this part would just take us 15-20 minutes. Famous last words. So the Gemara was on to say, here. Okay, Savar the Gemara is on to say that he thought they thought from him that just like he was machadish to them, Rav Nuna, that Shabbos is kavas the kiddush, kakoval havdalah. So also there's a kviyus lavdalah, which means that it would be an isser to continue to eat in the middle of your suda. You start shalosh shudas. By the way, just before we go to shalosh shudas, just not to think that this priest's mapa mukadash is totally mufka from any reality in our world. It was just very negea to many people in Yerushalayim when Purim, the second day of Purim, when Tesvav falls out on Erev Shabbos. So you have a lot of people that actually are Mekayim priest's mapa mukadash. It's not uncommon people to do that they start their Sudas Purim on Friday, the Yotzei Sudas Purim, and then it extends into Shabbos to turn that into Suda Shabbos. So then there are a lot of people that are part of Mapa Makadosh. So then you have the Shaila, at what time, etc. You know, these are real Shailas L'Halacha for people, anyone who does that, who did that. Okay, so Talmidei Rav thought that from Amenuna, Kihechi de Kava the Kiddush Kakava the Avdallah, Amru Rav Ramram Hachiyam Rav the Kiddush Kavas the Avdallah. It's only Kaveh the Kiddush and not Avdallah. And immediately the mifsak, the mifsak of sakinan. That's only you don't have to be postek. If you're in the middle of shal shudas, you don't have to be mafsik to do Avdallah. You're allowed to continue shal shudas later into the night. But you can't begin. And then we go on. But you're allowed to just drink coffee, drink water. That's okay. Water is okay. All right. So getting back to the Etzem Sugya. So the Maskanas of Gemara that Lavdallah, we don't have to be mafsik. But here there seems to be a major machlok Soshanim. the Rif, the Shulta Giborim on the Rif by us, he wants to be medayik that since according to the Rif, this is really a hemshech of the previous Shakotari of the Gemara. Shakotari was, according to the Rif, was, unlike the Rashbam, was at what time do we say Shabbos is Kavas? We came out of the Maskana that Shabbos is Kavas Lebenish Moshes. So once it's Kaveh, so the Shulchan Gemara makes a mathematical cheshbon. Since the Shakotari was about ended off with Benish Moshes, so that Savar Mina, that they thought that Kavas Lahavdallah also is only the Gabi Benish Moshes. Masha Enkin, if it became Tzesa Kohavim, so then Rav Hanuna would agree that it's the Havdalah Kavas. Once you get to Tzesa Kohavim, then there is Taka and Isser to continue eating. That's the way he learns the halacha according to the Rif. In other words, that will come out to be a tremendous machlokas, and that's really the shita of the Bala Iter brought in the Rush and Simon Yud Beis. He brings the Bala Iter that once you get to Tzesa Kochavim, then you're not allowed to continue Shal Shudas any further. You have to stop and make Abdullah. And the Rush is cholik on that. He says that there's no ancient tam to say that the Sugya is only talking about Benish Moshes. He doesn't hold to this cheshbon with the Rif, and but the Shulchan Giborim says it, so there is a cheshbon like that, and that's Taka the Bal Utter learns this cheshbon. But the Rosh is cholik on that. It says that even though it's Varech Hashecha, you don't have to be mafsik. There's a riot to Tosis like that also. Tosis, I brought it in my notes here, but Tosis in. I'll just give you a Mara Mokum. You can look at it. I don't want to spend the time on it now, but the top Tosfos in Kufam and Beis, if you want to take a look, you'll cheshbon out what he says over there. And it's Machokas Rav and Shmuel. That Rav said over there, Shmuel said over there, the Kishim Shematzik in the Kiddush, Kach Matsikim Lavdallah. I'll just quickly speak it out. So Shmuel Taka says that you have to be Mafsik Lavdallah. So it says, Rav Islay L'Kaman Lavdallah in Kavas. The Talmid of Rav Menuna says that Rav says it's not Kavas. So Shmuel before says that it is, and Rav says that it's not. So now, if we held that if you hold like the Bala Itter and like the Rif, like the Shulchan Gemara and the Rif, it's not a raya that it's a machlokas. You could say that Shmuel saying that it's Mafsik and Lavdallah is talking about Seisek HaChavim, and Rav says that it's not Mafsik and it's talking about Benish Moshes. So there's no raya there's machlokas. The fact that Tos says it is a machlokas must be holds like the rush that the din in Mafsik applies even to Seisek HaChavim. So you see that the Tosfos holds like the rush, and it's not like the Bala Iter. That's what comes out. That's the cheshbon. The Maisa, this Shaila is 2 days in Shulchan Aruch and the beginning of Simon Reis Sadik Test. It brings 2 days. The Ramah says the minig is Kasfar Harishona, like the first day, which is like the rush that we're not masikin, but it's not just a extraneous shita. It's brought in Shulchan Aruch. There is a shita like that. Just we're knowing not to. So we have to understand what is the Nukudas Machlokas over here, whether you have to be Mafsik, Lavdallah, once you get to Tzesel Chavim or not. So the Maisa is a very Geshmaka rush in Simon Yud Zion. And the Shala of whether you can be Mukadish on Pas. The rush brings down, you can find it here, it's a very long rush. So I find it here. So let me read the words of the rush here. Okay. He brings down the beginning of Simon Zion, the rush in our parak. He brings the Shitas Rashbam that you could be Mukadish on Pas. Say the Echulu and Birchas Hamotzi and make Kiddush. Rabbi Ben Atan asks on him a number of kashas. By Omer ben Etam, the Ena Kachan al Pas Klal. You can't do that. The Kiddush Chomer mi Avdallah, the Kiddush Kovas, Avdallah Eno Kovas. We see from our sugya of that Kiddush is more Chomer than Havdalah because Kiddush is Kovas. Once Zman Kiddush comes in, it's Kovas and you can't eat till you're Makadosh. But Havdalah, we paskin, Eno Kovas. The Rebbeinu Tam holds like the Rush in our sugya that it's not Kovas by Havdalah. So you see that Havdalah is less Chomer than Kiddush. Farmina Nami Lakaman B'Shmaitin, Savramina, Kiddush Lamakachi, Abdullah Mavdalinin, Abdullah Ena Alapas. Can't be Mavdalan Pas. Can Armina Lakaman, a Memar Bas Tabas, Foshken Kiddush. If you can't be Mavdalan Pas, and Abdullah is less Chomer than Kiddush, certainly you can't be Makadosh on Pas. Interesting raya. So the Rush says, the Rush says, okay, it's a long Rush, so to find a way around it. The minig is to be Makadosh on Pas, and that's how Skans are going in. Mashahevi Raya Rabbeinu Tam, the Kiddush Chomer mi Avdallah, Shum the Kovas, the Kiddush, and a Kovas la Avdallah. To say Kiddush is more Chomer than Avdallah because it's Kovas and Avdallah is not Kovas, our sugya. Ain't a Raya, that's not a Raya. The Lamishum Chumra, the Kiddushu. That is Kiddush Kovas, not because of the Chumra of Kiddush. Ela Tam Yeshel Davar. There's a reason for that. The Dinhu Shetikva the Kiddush Mishum Kavod Shabbos. It's mistaber that once this man Kiddush comes, you should be koveya the suda l'chavod Shabbos through Kiddush, not to eat until you're Makadosh. Aval Avdallah ain't a kavod Shabbos. She'd starach l'havsek sudaso kedei l'havdil. It's for carrot the opposite. It's not kavod Shabbos. You should have to stop the Shabbos in order to be mavdil. On the contrary, you should keep Shabbos going as long as possible. So, mitzad the svor of kavod Shabbos, that's why Kiddush is kovas, and Havdalah is not kovas. So it's not a raya the Rebbeinu Tam that it's not because of a chumrah, but because they're two totally different svoras. So how do we understand the kudas and machlokas over here? What's he telling us? And the Maisa, what the Rush is saying over here, the Chorah, some Furish Gemara and Kuf Ham and Beis will get there soon, that when it comes to Havdalah, there's a mitzvah to push it off as much as possible, that it shouldn't be lavid of katuna. It shouldn't look like Shabbos is something heavy upon you, like a heavy weight that you're trying to get rid of as soon as possible. Shabbos to try to hold on.
What would be the halacha as far as Meiser in that case with by Motzei Shabbos?
Good question. Probably once it's Motzei Shabbos, then I would think that you're allowed to eat it without, there's no longer Oneg Shabbos left. There's nothing. Well, you mean if you're eating Shal Shudas
still? That depends on.
If you're in the middle of Shal Shudas. Yeah. But I guess the Chorah I would say, if you're in the middle of Shal Shudas, then you're being Mamshich to do Shabbos, like I that, then it's a good question. I don't have a raya for you, but it's staber to say that you couldn't eat those pears either because you're continuing Suda Shabbos. So Lagavi that Suda, I would think that you can't. But if somebody's not eating Shusai, the Stam come along and without Abdullah, they want to eat. Let's say for some reason they can't, they're sick or whatever. So I would think that that they could eat without being Meiser because it's no longer Shabbos. That's actually what we want to talk about. Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about Dinei D'Oraisa. I mean, it's Erev Shabbos. I would think that it's Mustaver that it'll be different.
Well, the Chi of Meiser, but Shabbos Kavas is only a Din D'Rabbanan. That we're saying is a Din D'Rabbanan.
Why?
Because
it's oneg. It makes it
says that it's not that when Shabbos is Kavas, make it a Chilas Keva. It's a din in the Gavra, the way you understand. It's not a din in the Chefza of the Chita. And Pashtas, unless you're in Pashtas, it's only going to be. Mishnah Melech says it's only going to be for Shabbos, not for after Shabbos. Once Shabbos goes out, it goes back to its Ikar Din. It didn't make it La'olam like that. That's not like when Shabbos comes in, then all the food in the world then becomes Kavua forever. It's only Legabe the Achila of Shabbos. It doesn't stay Nikva L'Maiser from then on, all the food in the world.
But everyone agrees to that with the Mishnah? I mean, even it could be still
otherwise you're going to say tremendous. Otherwise, you're going to say tremendous chiddush. That the whole din of achilas aroi by all meister is only until a Shabbos comes in. Once it's been a Shabbos, then all food is chayav and meister at that point on. That for sure nobody says. It's only the gabi
I think I just confused myself in the whole sugya.
Pardon?
I think I just confused the whole sugya for myself now. So.
Okay. Sorry about that.
No, I'm trying to figure out the mechanism, anyways, of the meister, but I whatever. The last end of Shiur, I shouldn't be asking. I'm sorry.
Okay, we'll talk afterwards and give me a call. So, okay. Basically, okay, there's a lot more to speak about to try to explain the Nekudas Machlokas. I'll just throw out one point without bringing all the Makoros for it. That's something we spoke about in the past. Is the din that you have to you can't do malacha, and the Rambam says you can't even eat until Havdalah. Puts it together with malacha until you're mavdal. Once it's the zman of Havdalah, if you're not in the middle of a suda. So is that mitzad? What is the din? The Isser Malacha Kodem Havdalah we spoke about previously from the Briskerov and the Mishnah Berurah and the previous Shiurim. Is that mitzad that it's just a regular din, like you can't do malacha before tefillas mincha, like they were on Shabbos Haftes. You can't start doing malacha, and there it depends. You can't get a haircut and certain other things because you might forget mincha. It's not covered, or there's a problem. There's a gzera to start doing things before mincha. Who did before Havdalah? You can't do malacha before Havdalah for the same reason. For that if that's the shot, then that's why the Ramah says that there's a difference between malachas kavuas and malachas she'enin kavuas. Because it's not really Shabbos anymore. It's just you can't do stuff before Havdalah. And you can't eat before Havdalah. Or is it shot that we're like mamshich the kedusha of Shabbos midrabanan? We say there's a hemshach kedusha Shabbos until you get to the point of Havdalah. And Beis Yosef learns that way, and that's why he's cholak on the shita that holds that there's a difference between malachas kavuas or enik kavuas. If it's still Shabbos, it doesn't make a difference what malacha. You can't do any malacha until you're mavdil, or at least say baruch hamavdil mikodesh l'chol. So that's the shah that are we mamshech kedusha Shabbos, or is it just a din of not doing malacha before and hu din achila before Havdalah? So for that there's going to be this nafkamina. There'll be a nafkamina of I'll try to just summarize this because we're almost out of time. That in other words, do we look at the etzam Ma'isa Havdalah klape? I'll give you an example. We had a machlokas Rav and Shmuel that I'm trying to keep track of time. I'm having to leave out a lot to try to say this. Haven't make any sense. Let's just say that this machlokas Rav and Shmuel, which Tosha says whether we say Havdalah Kovas or not, once Havdalah comes, so if the svora is Atz Kavod Shabbos, if the vort we say the Shabbos is Mamshich, it continues, so then it's Keneged Kavod Shabbos to have to stop it, to have to make Havdalah, and that'll be the svora of Rav that Havdalah is Eno Kovas. But if you say that Shabbos goes out in Monashach, once it's Ois Shabbos, Ois Shabbos. Once Shabbos is over, it's over. We can't be continuing it. And the reason that you can't do anything before Havdalah is because it's before Havdalah. Because it's a din to do Havdalah. But Shabbos is really over. It's mitzad the covet of Havdalah. You can't do malacha or start eating things. So in that case, then you could say that Shabbos is kovas. If it's the kid that Havdalah is kovas, is kovea, that you can no longer eat once Havdalah comes, because now it's not Shabbos. The fact that you're eating doesn't matter. It's not Shabbos anymore. So then that'll be the svora why you have to stop and you have to make Havdalah. So again, so that's the summary over here, is that if you say that the midrabanan is we consider it Shabbos, it's covered Shabbos to continue Shabbos until you make Havdalah. So then it's connected covered Shabbos to have to stop. But if if Shabbos is really over, and now there's a din to be malava the melech to do Abdullah, it's a din livui, like the Gemara said already previously, that like when the king goes out, you have to be malava the king, and that's the Abdullah. So then on the contrary, then it's not covered Shabbos, it's not covered to the livui of the melech to not stop and make Abdullah, because the melech is leaving and not doing anything about it. So that would be the svara of Shmuel that said back there that Shabbos is kovas, and that would be the question over here, la halacha, that according to the Rif is holding that only ben Ishmasos you don't have to stop, but if the Shulta Geborim learns on the Rif that once Seisa Kochavim comes, then you do have to stop, and that's the sheet of the Bala Itur. Their svara is the Shabbos is really over, and now that Shabbos is really over, for you to continue eating is that's a pachim panim to Shabbos. The king is leaving. You have to do malava the king and do that livui. But the rush and Tosfos, and that's why we're paskening, is that Shabbos is not over. We say midrabanan that we're still continuing Shabbos. At Kama we're continuing Shabbos midrabanan until Abdullah. Then for Keret, the opposite. Then it's a covered Shabbos to not stop, to continue to eat until we finally want to finish our meal and then make Abdullah. Okay, so there's a lot to go into. I don't have time to the Makoros of this. I'll just give you a maramokam that you can. In our siman machlokas Taz and Magen Avram, whether or not you have to be mavdil, whether okay, you know what, I'm not going to go into it. I'll lose everybody. We'll stay with the svara right now, and maybe next time we'll talk more. But Adkan. All right.
Is Rabbi available? Can I call for a minute?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Have a good Shabbos.
Okay, Shabbos, everybody.